Thank you for watching Army Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. Following are the news which have been reported by American, Canadian and European channels. African, Asian channels and news agencies, Reuters, AFP and AP also have reported the same news. Now the headlines. Russia is bribing European Union MPs. Rescue effort on Baltimore Bridge is continued. A large crane has been brought there. Israel killed 44 in Lebanon in an attack. Carbon tax in Canada. Immigration problems for Mexico. American green industries policy. Attacks on women in New York. Holiday rush in America. Republican and Democratic leaders' appearance in New York City. Pope didn't show up for Good Friday. Israeli leader agreed to start talks with Hamas. Haiti crisis linger on. Russian attack on Ukraine cities. Singer Buoyancy and Cowboy Carter. Now the news in detail.
Good evening, I'm William Brangham. Jeff Bennett and Anna Navaz are away. On the NewsHour tonight, efforts to curb carbon pollution turns to heavy industries like cement and steel that contribute enormously to global warming. Then, gang violence in Haiti displaces hundreds of thousands of people and traps Americans trying to flee. And a new investigation details how police tactics meant to just stop people often end up killing them.
Officers went too far, too fast, too long, and they were making errors in the way they applied this force that went beyond best safety practices.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad.
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the legendary Mississippi River, travelers explore Civil War battlefields and historic riverside towns. Aboard our fleet of American riverboats, you can experience local culture and cuisine and discover the music and history of the mighty Mississippi. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Initial stages of a salvage operation are underway tonight at the site of the bridge collapse in Baltimore. One giant crane and a smaller one arrived today with more coming. They will clear away the concrete and mangled metal, as well as the cargo ship that hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge. But officials warn it is a mammoth job.
It is not going to be days or weeks or months. This is going to take time. Every single phase, we have to focus on safety of the people who are doing the work. We have to make sure that we're doing it in cooperation and collaboration with all the parties that need to be involved inside this work. We have to make sure that we're doing it in an environmentally sound way. And we have to make sure we're focusing on completion.
Also today, the White House announced President Biden will visit Baltimore next week to view the operation. There are more signs that inflation is gradually easing. A gauge tracked by the Federal Reserve shows prices rose 0.3% in February. That's down slightly from the January rise. The year-to-year increase was still 2.5%, still above the Fed's goal of just 2%. Former Senator and Vice Presidential candidate Joe Lieberman was laid to rest today in Stamford, Connecticut. Politicians and family remembered the longtime Democrat turned independent for his bipartisanship. They included Al Gore, the Democrats' 2000 presidential nominee, who chose Lieberman as his running mate.
I saw him ready to reclaim friendships that had been seared by disagreements, ready to look for ways to bridge divisions, ready to seek reconciliation, ready to stand for his principles, always.
Lieberman passed away Wednesday after suffering a fall. He was 82 years old. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now says he's ready to return to mediated talks with Hamas. His office issued a statement today saying that he, quote, approved the next round of talks in the coming days in Doha and Cairo. Negotiations have appeared stalled after a series of stops and starts. Meanwhile, Israel hit Syria today with the deadliest airstrikes in years. An independent Syrian war monitoring group reports 44 people were killed, mostly Syrian troops. The attacks came mainly outside Aleppo, targeting the missile depots of Hezbollah militants who are backed by Iran. Israel has stepped up strikes inside Syria since the war in Gaza began. That war put a damper today on Good Friday observances in Jerusalem. Fewer people than usual carried crosses through the streets of the Old City. Elsewhere, Pope Francis conducted traditional services at the Vatican. And in the Philippines, several villages reenacted the crucifixion of Christ as they have for decades. One man, now 63 years old, was nailed to a cross for the 35th time.
I can't tell for now for how long I can do this since my body is also getting old. And so I can't say if this will be my last or if I can do it again next year. It will all depend on my body.
Church leaders in the Philippines generally oppose these crucifixions, but the tradition has endured. In Ukraine, Russia launched another wave of aerial attacks overnight. Almost 100 missiles and drones struck power plants at Kyiv and Dnipro in a wide-ranging assault across central and western Ukraine. It's the latest in a wave of stepped-up Russian attacks on Ukraine's power system. And a passing of note, Louis Gossett Jr., the first black man to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, died today in Santa Monica, California. He debuted on Broadway in 1953 and gained national renown and an Emmy as Fiddler in the 1977 TV miniseries Roots. His Oscar-winning role was as the Marine Corps drill instructor in An Officer and a Gentleman in 1982.
Well, you've been all your lives at an orgy? Listen to Mick Jagger music and bad mouth in your country, I'll bet. You better stop eyeballing me, boy. You're not worthy enough to look your superiors in the eye. use your peripheral vision. Understand?
Yes, sir.
Every time I say understand, I want the whole group to say, yes, sir. Understand? Yes, sir. Understand? Yes, sir.
In later years, Gossett also appeared in the remake of The Color Purple. Louis Gossett Jr. was 87 years old. Still to come on the News Hour, the Georgia legislature passes new voting rules ahead of the general election. An Oklahoma City council member faces a recall election for his ties to white nationalism. David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on the week's political headlines, and Beyoncé drops a new genre-defying album.
This is the PBS News Hour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
When we focus on the ways to reduce America's carbon emissions, we talk a lot about how we generate electricity and the vehicles we use to get around. That's because those two sectors, electricity and transportation, each contribute about a quarter to this country's pollution. And thanks to the rapid growth of renewable energy and more efficient electric cars, those sectors are starting to get much cleaner. But another major source of pollution is what's known as heavy industry. That's making things like cement and steel, and that sector has been much slower to adapt. This week, the Biden administration pledged $6 billion for a series of pilot projects in 20 different states to try and spur a green revolution in those industries. So will this help move the needle? For that, we are joined by Rebecca Dell. She studies how to clean up heavy industry for the Climate Works Foundation. Rebecca Dell, thank you so much for being here. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm says that this is the biggest investment that the United States has ever made in this industry, but it sounds like we haven't really tried to do that much thus far. So I'm just trying to understand, how big an investment is this really?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we talk about the industrial sector, we're talking about manufacturing, construction, all of the activities that make things as opposed to using energy. And so $6 billion is by a very large margin, the largest investment, not just that America has ever made, but that anybody that we're impacted by the health harm pollution and the job losses. And so those communities really benefit from a healthier environment and the tens of thousands of jobs or more that are going to come from these projects.
All right, Rebecca Dell of the Climate Works Foundation, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This week, the UN said over 1,500 Haitians have been killed so far this year because of a crisis it calls cataclysmic. For nearly a month now, the country has been engulfed in another wave of brutal gang violence. Prime Minister Ariel Henry said he would resign as soon as a transitional council is created that will select a new prime minister. But so far, there has been no breakthrough. Nick Schifrin has this report, and a warning, there are very disturbing images in this story.
This week, parts of Port-au-Prince are a shell of a city.
And peace.
But today, there is only war, stealing the country's future. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
The death of George Floyd, which sparked a national reckoning over policing, resulted from a police technique that is considered non-lethal. A new investigation led by the Associated Press has now found that is much more common than had been thought. John Yang has our report.
William, the investigation found that between 2012 and 2021, more than 1,000 people died after police used physical force that was not intended to be lethal. That includes batons, stun guns, physical restraints, and chemical agents. The oldest victim they found was 95. The youngest...
For your frame of reference, George Floyd was held down for roughly 9.5 minutes.
Reese Dunklin of the Associated Press. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Georgia was ground zero for the false claims of election fraud during the 2020 presidential election, and that state was decided by fewer than 12,000 votes. Georgia is in the spotlight again as Joe Biden and Donald Trump head for a rematch. But as Laura Barron-Lopez explains, new election laws could add additional complications for voters.
In the final hours of the legislative session last night, Georgia Republicans passed a series of new laws
Of some of these false claims about election fraud that really emerged in the lead up to the 2020 election and are still with us today.
That's Sam Greenglass of WABE in Atlanta. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
In the rural city of Enid, Oklahoma, there will be a recall election next Tuesday over allegations of racism and white supremacy. Commissioner Judd Blevins was confronted at a candidate forum this week by residents who want to oust him for his alleged ties to a white nationalist group. While Blevins has tried to blunt the criticism, it has sharply divided this small town. I spoke recently to NewsHour's community correspondent Adam Kemp, who has been following this closely. So Adam, let's go back to the start here. Judd Blevins has only been in office for about a year. Was any of his past...
The threat of normalizing white supremacy is one of the bigger threats facing this nation.
All right, NewsHour community correspondent Adam Kemp, thanks for this great reporting.
Thanks.
A campaign fundraiser nets Biden millions, and a stock market debut could potentially net Trump billions. On that and the other political stories shaping the week, we turn to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for the Washington Post. Gentlemen, so nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about this money race that is going on. Biden had last night this event in New York City, a Radio City Music Hall.
And so, to me, that will be the senator's legacy.
Jonathan Capehart, David Brooks, so nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, man.
Beyonce Knowles Carter has just dropped her latest album. It's called Cowboy Carter, and it's quickly becoming one of the most talked about records of the year. Jeffrey Brown has more on how this superstar's new work is deeply rooted in country music.
If it's Beyonce, it's big. And if it's venturing into an unexpected arena of music, it's even bigger.
Also incorporating the LGBTQ community has been really just liberating for all types of people.
All right, Cowboy Carter, it's out today. Candace McDuffie of The Root, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be sure to tune into Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight for a look at the stark contrast between the Biden and Trump campaigns in this year's historic rematch. And on PBS News Weekend, the next in our series, America's Safety Net. What's at stake for millions of Americans on Medicaid as states reevaluate how they offer health insurance? And that is the News Hour for tonight. I'm William Brangham. On behalf of the entire News Hour team, thank you so much for joining us.
On this Friday night, carbon tax hike criticism, the fears about affordability.
You have to give people a break, especially nowadays.
Conservative premiers across this country are not telling the truth.
And a reality check on all the political rhetoric. Deepening desperation in Haiti.
People are often afraid to leave their houses.
The warning about what could happen if police don't get proper support. Saving this whale, the mission to free an orphan orca calf stuck in a BC lagoon.
Global National with RNSR, reporting tonight. Through Gotcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. As Canadians hit the road this holiday weekend, many are bracing for what could be a more expensive return home. The federal carbon tax hike takes effect on Monday with gas prices set to rise 3 cents a litre. The majority of premiers in this country are expressing their displeasure, prompting the Prime Minister to fire back and call Conservatives liars. In tonight's top story, Abigail Beeman has a reality check on what's at stake and what Canadians can expect in the days to come.
I just don't understand why they're going to increase the carbon tax by 23%. It hurts people.
A tax hike that will make it harder for people to eat, heat, and house themselves.
At press conferences and at parliamentary committees.
This is a wonderful policy, and they are stacking. That's making life more unaffordable.
Pushback on the Liberal carbon tax hike due Monday, which will see gas prices climb by 3 cents a litre.
It's not just about another 3 cents. It's about all of the cumulative effect of increased cost of energy.
That is, again, inhumane. It begs the question, how far will the federal government go to make life even more difficult and expensive when so many Canadians are already struggling?
It didn't increase the momentum, it might have actually blunted it somewhat. Political scientist Laurie Williams says feisty parliamentary hearings this week actually turned attention back on provincial government responsibility, though momentum is still in favour of critics.
As people lose track of where the tax builds into the price, as oil prices go up and down, I think people are going to probably start looking at affordability more directly.
Affordability, the key theme on which federal Conservatives have long been focused, while the Liberals, often accused of being out of touch there, have been hyper-focused on it this week in a cross-country tour trying to reach Gen Z and millennials.
We're putting more money back in the pockets of families.
A week that saw the Prime Minister take a wide swipe at those carbon tax critics.
Conservative premiers across this country are misleading Canadians, are not telling the truth.
What I heard is actually desperation, because the reality is that you are going up against a whole bunch of premiers who collectively outnumber you, and it's going to be really hard to convince Canadians that, when they're out chirping, that they are wrong.
And some say the debate is about more than climate change.
The level of social class underpinning all of this, and it's really about urban Canada versus rural Canada, and a lot of the urbanites just don't grasp what's going on in rural Canada, and that's exactly what a lot of the premiers and what Poilievre is really promoting.
Expect to hear more from the Liberals on affordability, especially for younger Canadians as they crisscross the country ahead of April 16th's budget. Meanwhile, the opposition leader will kick off next week in BC, the day the carbon tax hike takes effect. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa. The United Nations has a blunt warning about the situation in Haiti. It's calling for immediate and bold action to fight what it calls a worsening catastrophe. The surge in gang violence in recent weeks has brought with it a surge in hunger. Close to 5 million people, nearly half of Haiti's population, now faces food insecurity. Mike Armstrong reports.
It's being called apocalyptic. Some streets in the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince, look like a war zone. Canada's embassy is on a major thoroughfare and has for more than a week been protected by Canadian Special Forces. The only safe way in or out is by helicopter. This was one of 9 airlifts to the Dominican Republic Thursday. But for most Haitians, the UN says the city is an open-air prison or worse.
There's no way out, air, land, or sea, and in fact, it's not even so open air anymore because people are often afraid to leave their houses.
While gang violence makes some afraid to leave their homes, others are afraid to stay. The UN says last summer about 50,000 people were classified as internally displaced, basically refugees in their own country. That number is now about 8 times higher. There are also more and more reports of torture, disappearances, and deaths.
The numbers are all going very much in the wrong direction very quickly.
Now, one of the gang leaders controlling territory in the capital is Jimmy Cherizier, known as Barbecue. He also leads a sort of gang alliance called Viv Ensemble, or Living Together. A team with Sky News visited Cherizier's neighborhood this week. The gang leader says he would consider a ceasefire, but wants to be included in talks to pick a new prime minister. The acting prime minister is still stuck outside the country. Ariel Henry is set to step down when his replacement is chosen by the new transitional council, but Cherizier says that decision is still being made by the same people who led Haiti in the past.
Classe politique là, il y a fait une exclusion, côté qu'il y a dit, bandit, nèg azam baladin. Mais son façon pour renouveler le système, je l'ai. Parce que le système là, il vient en boucle.
Haitian police are trying to show strength. This was a video released Wednesday promising officers are on a war footing day and night. Well, gangs control about 80% of the capital. One UN expert says about 5,000 foreign police officers would be needed to stabilize the country. The planned force from Kenya is now on hold. It's only supposed to be 1,000 officers. The UN has a warning. If an international stabilization force isn't moved in to support Haitian police soon, it says there may not be a Haitian police force to support. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal. There are signs Israel may be heeding the international court's legally binding order to allow more aid into Gaza. Social media video from an Israeli Defense Ministry unit appears to show 9 UN aid trucks bringing food into northern Gaza overnight. The unit also claims 47 trucks have entered through this path since it opened earlier this month. The World Court ordered Israel Thursday to do all it can to ensure basic food supplies enter Gaza without delay. It warned that famine has now gripped the territory as Israel continues its onslaught. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also facing pressure to ensure the safe return of remaining hostages still in Hamas captivity. Today, he confirmed a new round of negotiations will proceed in the coming days, but today also brought renewed fears of the conflict expanding. Syria is accusing Israel of deadly strikes near the Aleppo airport, which killed more than 40 people. Several members of the armed group Hezbollah are reportedly among the dead. As Crystal Gamansing reports, that's on top of another strike which killed a Hezbollah deputy commander in Lebanon.
A series of pre-dawn strikes in northern Syria reportedly hit a missile warehouse and training center for the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. A UK-based Syrian human rights organization calls it the deadliest bombings by Israel in 3 years.
Israel released images of a strike that it says killed the deputy commander of Hezbollah's rocket and missile unit in Lebanon. Israel's defense minister did not confirm the strike in Syria, but said it would pursue Hezbollah wherever it operates. This Friday, like many since Hamas led a deadly series of attacks on Israel on October 7th, pro-Palestinian demonstrators took to the streets in Yemen. We came out for those who were displaced, for the children without homes. We came out for those who were unjustly killed in cold blood. While there is growing international support for the innocent civilian population in Gaza caught up in the fighting, Sana'a is held by Houthi rebels. The Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas are all allies of Iran. Iran calls the militia network the axis of resistance. The Houthis have ratcheted up tensions in the Red Sea, launching attacks on vessels the group claims have links to Israel, while Hezbollah launches strikes and counterstrikes on Israel. None of it is easing the pain or suffering across the Gaza Strip. This man in Han Yunis lost his home. If we were sitting in the main room, he says, all of our children would have been killed. Hostage negotiations are expected to resume, reviving the possibility of a temporary ceasefire and hostage release. Nearly 5 months have passed since the last reprieve. Crystal Demansing, Global News, London. There is a renewed push to bring home jailed American journalist Evan Gershkovich on the one-year anniversary of his arrest in Russia. His employer at the time of his arrest, the Wall Street Journal, published a dramatic front page today with a large blank space under the headline, "His story should be here." Next to it, articles about his detention and authoritarian threats to journalists around the world. Gershkovich is the first U.S. journalist to be detained in Russia on espionage charges since the Cold War, claims the White House has called ridiculous. On Tuesday, a Russian court extended his detention for a 5th time. Gershkovich has been ordered to stay in prison until at least the end of June. A massive cleanup operation has officially begun in Baltimore as crews start the daunting task of clearing debris from the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. Several cranes will eventually be involved, but officials warn it will be a long process to reopen the port to ships and much longer to rebuild the bridge. Joel Senek has more on the monumental cleanup effort from Maryland tonight. Joel?
One of the largest cranes on the East Coast is now at the site of the collapsed bridge behind me. It is a critical piece of equipment for crews who need to remove the ship and the bridge debris from the water. A gigantic helping hand ready to pick up the pieces of the fatal Baltimore bridge collapse.
This crane that we're looking at is massive. The thing we also know is this. So is the challenge ahead of us.
The crane is able to lift nearly 1,000 metric tons. It will be assisted by ground crews like these engineers using sonar to map out what lies in the river below.
This is one of the most daunting engineering salvage challenges the country has faced in decades.
Engineering expert Stephen Flynn compares the site to a complex jigsaw puzzle.
The debris is structurally unsound. You're doing things underwater where there's not a lot of visibility. You got currents.
The 6 construction workers who died were honored by their colleagues Friday. All were from Mexico or Central America. They were working on the bridge at the time. 4 of the bodies are still believed to be pinned in the debris.
Here, we are reminded once again about the enormous contribution that the immigrants make to this country.
There are also economic concerns for the thousands who work at the now-closed Port of Baltimore. Officials saying there's a lot of speculation as to when the channel will reopen, but the fact is they do not know.
Mr. President, when will you visit Baltimore?
Joe Biden telling reporters Friday he will visit the region next week. Also headed here, more cranes, 10 tugboats, and 8 salvage vessels. But first, crews need to cut the bridge into pieces so the cranes can lift them out. P2?
All right, Joel Senek near Baltimore. Thanks for that, Joel. There's no catastrophe yet. Coming up, why Niagara Falls has proactively declared a state of emergency. Pope Francis was healthy enough to preside over and speak at today's Good Friday service at the Vatican. Good Friday is the most somber day on the Christian calendar, marking the death of Jesus by crucifixion. In previous years, the 87-year-old pontiff would pray on the floor of the basilica, but facing mobility and respiratory issues, he instead prayed from his wheelchair. Ontario's Niagara region has declared a state of emergency ahead of next month's total solar eclipse. Officials say it's out of an abundance of caution to ensure it's ready for what it's anticipating to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. Thousands of visitors are expected to flood the region. Niagara Falls has been identified as one of the best places in the world to watch the rare event, as it sits on the path of totality. Hotel prices have already skyrocketed, with some charging upwards of $1,000 a night. In BC, rescuers are racing against the clock to save an orca calf stranded at a lagoon on Vancouver Island. The 2-year-old whale has been stuck there since a low tide trapped the animal and its pregnant mother last week. The mother died, but the calf refuses to leave. Efforts to coax it back into the open ocean have failed, including on Thursday when 11 boats tried to guide it out. Attempts are pausing for the next few days due to lower tides, but concerns are growing around the animal's well-being.
This makes it very tricky. They really haven't developed the blubber stores to be able to fast, or to, so we're talking about days to like a week or two that this calf potentially has.
Rescuers are now considering whether to airlift the young whale out with a sling, but experts say even if it reunites with its pod, there are no guarantees it will be welcomed back. Sudan's humanitarian disaster ahead, how a beacon of hope in Africa spiraled into brutal civil war. Crews are working to recover the bodies of 45 people killed in a bus crash in South Africa. The transportation ministry says the driver lost control and the bus plunged off of a bridge into a ravine about 15 meters below, bursting into flames. Investigators say some of the bodies are burned beyond recognition. The passengers were traveling from Botswana to South Africa for an Easter service. The lone survivor, an 8-year-old girl, is recovering in hospital and is in stable condition. The conflict in Gaza and the war in Ukraine are occupying the minds and agendas of political leaders across the world, but there are many other conflicts getting little attention, including the nearly year-long civil war in Sudan. The huge African nation is in the grips of a hunger and migration emergency. The crisis stems from a battle between the Sudanese army and a rebel paramilitary group that's trying to gain control. It's a crisis that has been building for months. Even before the war, some 12 million people were in need of emergency food aid. Redmond Shannon reports.
The United Nations says around 8 million people have had to leave their homes because of the war in Sudan. Almost 2 million of them have fled the country altogether.
It's quite shocking to see how a country that used to be a beacon of hope for the continent has just become, an apocalyptic catastrophe, really.
Mathilde Vu works with displaced people in Sudan.
Every single person we talked to had seen a level of tragedy and a level of violence that was completely unbearable. Targeting, killing, rape as a weapon of war, execution on the way while people were trying to flee. These are so common.
Alongside violence, the UN warns of catastrophic hunger. It says it has just a fraction of the funds it needs to help the almost 18 million people experiencing acute food insecurity. The warring sides are accused of blocking aid from getting to those most in need. The UN Security Council recently passed a resolution calling for a truce, but to little effect. A newly appointed Washington envoy is trying to relaunch peace talks. A US-Saudi peace initiative failed last year.
It's because there's no incentive to actually resolve the conflict absent complete domination, absent complete victory, mostly because it's an existential war now.
For almost a year, two former allies have fought a war essentially about power and money. Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, leader of Sudan's army, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, head of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces.
Like all wars in the African continent and all wars generally, external actors play a really disproportionate and important role.
The army is supported by neighbouring Egypt and reportedly by Iran. The RSF is widely believed to be backed by the United Arab Emirates, something the UAE denies. It also has help from Russia's Wagner mercenary group. So any incentive to stop fighting will likely have to involve some or all of these parties. In the meantime, the people of Sudan will suffer in a war that almost none of them ever wanted. Redmond Channel Global News, London.
Tomorrow on Global National, we investigate a little-known government program that's meant to help get Sudanese people to Canada. It's been open for months, but relatives here say their loved ones' applications are still very much in limbo. Next, a fond farewell to Louis Gossett Jr.
Better stop eyeballing me, boy. You're not good enough to look your superiors in the eye.
Remember the man who was much more than a stellar actor on the big screen.
Every time I say understand, I want the whole group to say, yes, sir, understand. Yes, sir, understand. Yes, sir.
After Louis Gossett Jr. in the film An Officer and a Gentleman, a performance that made him the first black man to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Gossett died today in California. No cause of death has been revealed. Gossett was also known for his Emmy-winning role in the miniseries Roots, one of the earliest in his 6-decade career. He was a basketball player, a musician, and an activist, establishing a foundation to combat racism. Gossett was 87 years old. Well, if there's one guy you want on your roster to kick off the baseball season, it would be BC's Tyler O'Neill. He set a Major League Baseball record last night with a home run on opening day for the 5th straight year. When asked what the secret is, he said he just wanted to kickstart the season. But the real secret behind O'Neill's power might actually run in the family. Tyler's father, Terry O'Neill, is a bodybuilder and former Mr. Canada. All right, and that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is this old grain elevator in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching and hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.
An escalation of cross-border fighting as Israel targets Iran-aligned groups in Lebanon and Syria, killing a top Hezbollah military leader. The Czech intelligence services accused Russia of bribing MEPs to promote its propaganda in Brussels, allegations backed up by Polish investigators. And France 24's team in Mexico brings us a special report on the efforts to stem the flow of migrants, a key point of attack against President Joe Biden as he seeks re-election later this year. Those of you just joining us, welcome to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Alexander Orkot. Now, Israel has launched its biggest strikes on targets outside of Gaza since its war against Hamas began. The airstrikes hit Iranian proxies in the region, in northern Syria's Aleppo province, as well as in Lebanon, where the IDF said it killed the deputy head of Hezbollah's rocket unit. With more details, here's Cami Knight.
The Israeli military claims these images show the strike that killed a Hezbollah rocket unit commander in Lebanon. This is all that was left after the attack. It's the latest sign of escalation in hostilities, Israeli forces announcing they're stepping up their military strategy.
We are turning from defense to attack
when it comes to pursuing Hezbollah. In any place Hezbollah is operating, we will reach them. This is correct for Beirut, Baalbek, Tyre, Sidon, and Nabatea. And it's also true for places further afield, such as Damascus, Homs, and Hama. In any place we need to operate, we will act.
That campaign has already started. Israeli airstrikes killing dozens of people, mostly soldiers, near Aleppo on Friday. This amateur footage claims to show the aftermath of strikes carried out overnight, the deadliest by Israel on Syria since October 7th. Hezbollah has confirmed the death of another one of its commanders in the attack. Israel has been ramping up its strikes on proxies of Iran, which gives Hezbollah both military and financial backing. Both sides have been exchanging near daily fire since last October, this latest escalation sparking fears of a wider regional conflict.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has meanwhile approved new talks for a ceasefire in Gaza, a day after the world's top court ordered Israel to let in more humanitarian aid. Israeli officials said the talks will be taking place in Cairo and Doha in the coming days. Well, despite calls for restraint, Israeli forces have continued pounding targets across the Gaza Strip. Andrew Hillier reports.
It was the middle of the night when their homes crumbled to the ground. Health officials in Gaza say the Israeli strikes came without warning in the southern city of Rafah, leaving families under the rubble. It was only later that Yasser Abu Muammar realized he'd lost his daughter.
The explosion happened and the house we were staying in was badly damaged. Asbestos fell on top of us and we couldn't see where the strike had hit. I stood over my children and my wife and tried to protect them from falling debris. We couldn't see anything because of the dust.
Medical staff at Rafah's Najjar hospital say at least 16 people were killed in the strikes. Further north, in Deir al-Balah, mourners crowded around the bodies of their loved ones in the Al-Aqsa hospital. They say they were killed in an Israeli airstrike.
It happened at midnight. They were all asleep and unaware of anything. Kamal was an English teacher. He'd been teaching his whole life. They hadn't done anything wrong, but the enemy showed no mercy and bombed the house. The entire family was killed. Why? We don't know.
The bloodshed could worsen in the coming months. More than 1 million displaced people have found shelter in Rafah, which Israel has threatened to invade if ceasefire talks come to nothing. It insists Hamas fighters are hiding in Gaza's southernmost city. But Israel's closest ally, the US, has warned against an invasion, saying it could turn Gaza's last remaining safe haven into a war zone for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians.
India is gearing up to hold the largest elections in the world in just a few weeks' time, with some 970 million people eligible to head to the polls. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to win re-election comfortably on a Hindu nationalist platform that's left many Indian Muslims feeling marginalized.
It's been nearly a year since Muhammad Asghar Ali was shot dead in an alleged anti-Muslim hate crime, and his family are still fighting for justice.
If his killer was a Muslim, he would have been hanged by now. But that won't happen because he's a Hindu. No one can return my father to us.
Ali was murdered in a shooting rampage on a train en route to Mumbai. As he bled out on the floor, his killer held Prime Minister Narendra Modi and other members of his ruling Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party. Ali's killing is yet another example of Islamophobia in the predominantly Hindu country, discrimination that experts say has heightened since Modi came to power in 2014 and that's set to get worse if he's re-elected in June. The BJ party denies it's sowing religious division in India.
It is the opposition parties who are using Muslim community as a shield. They are feeling the hate. Muslim community is absolutely comfortable.
Critics say that's simply not true. They believe Modi's Hindu nationalist agenda ignores Muslims' rights and restricts religious freedoms. This was once a mosque in South Delhi. It stood here for 600 years before it was demolished without warning in January by the Delhi Development Authority.
I'm scared whenever I hear bulldozers and policemen. They didn't even allow us to take our shoes. It was a cold winter morning.
Authorities insist it was an illegal structure. A controversial citizenship law passed just a few weeks ago by Modi's government is set to further limit Muslims' rights. It has the power to render many of India's 200 million Muslims stateless.
The Czech intelligence services are sounding the alarm alongside Polish investigators, warning that Russia has bribed several members of the European Parliament to promote its propaganda. So, who are these MEPs? Our sister channel France 2 investigates.
It could be the start of an explosive scandal right at the heart of the European Parliament. Could Vladimir Putin have agents amongst MEPs? According to the Belgian Prime Minister, the answer is yes.
We have seen that Russia has approached MEPs and paid them to spread Russian propaganda.
Om hier de Russische propaganda te komen promoten.
Belgian authorities haven't named any of these suspects. The investigation started with Czech intelligence services uncovering a vast network of Russian influence. It included a website called Voice of Europe based in Prague. It's now shut down, but it belonged to Viktor Medvedchuk, a close friend of Vladimir Putin. Medvedchuk is a pro-Russian Ukrainian oligarch. He was arrested in Kyiv in 2022, but freed at Moscow's request in exchange for the release of prisoners. The website no longer exists, but Voice of Europe videos continue to circulate online, showing interviews of a number of far-right MEPs, including French MEP Patricia Chagnon.
I think the priority above anything else is establishing peace in Ukraine today.
For other MEPs, the accusations have not come as a surprise.
For years now, I've been warning the European Parliament about Russian interference within our institution.
According to the information we have, this exclusively concerns far-right leaders throughout Europe.
Officials from France's far-right National Rally Party deny having received any money or instruction from Russia.
As far as I'm concerned, I have absolutely no knowledge of this. And of course, there's no question that any of our MPs are being paid for their speeches or anything like that.
Poland has also carried out an operation targeting a Russian espionage network, leading to one arrest and the seizure of €80,000. More investigations are in the works.
We're going to take a brief look at some of the other stories making world headlines. The Kremlin says discussions are underway over a possible exchange involving Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. The 32-year-old US citizen was detained in Russia a year ago on espionage charges, the first such charge against a Western journalist since the Soviet era. Gershkovich, his employers, and the White House reject the spying accusations they say are fabricated. Massive cranes have been brought to Baltimore to begin clearing the bridge that collapsed after it was hit by a container ship. Tons of twisted steel debris need to be cleared from a deep and fast-moving river. The task is made more delicate by the fact that the bodies of 4 workers are yet to be recovered. And France has carried out evacuations from Haiti to Martinique aboard 3 Navy vessels. 63 were French nationals. 80 came from other countries, mostly in the European Union. The French Foreign Ministry says more than 1,000 French citizens live in Haiti, and its embassy staff are mobilized to get them out despite the violence in the capital, Port-au-Prince. Now, in the United States, the conservative governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, is attacking President Joe Biden on migration as crossings have soared to an all-time high since he took office. The governor is pulling out all the stops to prevent migrants from gaining asylum, but just over the border, migrants from all over the Americas are doing whatever they can to make it across. This report by Quentin Duval and Laurence Cuvillier.
A high-security border resembling the front line of a country at war. Buoys, barbed wire, and 24-hour patrols to prevent illegal entry to American soil. Yet, staying in Mexico is not an option for those in this refuge. Despite the danger, this single mother from Colombia is preparing to cross the Rio Bravo.
I store my documents in this so they don't get damaged while I cross the river, so they don't get wet. I'm afraid, but I'm more afraid of going back to my country. If we leave here and something happens to us on the way back, since we've been here, we've been extorted, robbed, and forced to take our clothes off.
Manuel wants to play by the rules. He has an appointment to make an asylum application using the CBP-1 application. But even so, he's not guaranteed to cross the bridge.
It's very well organized crime because the police work with the extorters. If you don't pay, you don't get through. There are even people who have a fixed appointment, but when they arrive at the border, they aren't allowed to cross.
More than 1,000 people arrived every day in Piedras Negras between September and December last year. Faced with the influx of migrants, the governor of Texas decided to close one of the town's 2 bridges, paralyzing trade. Commerce has yet to resume fully between the 2 countries.
We have 40 or 50% of the flow clients we had before. Many companies say we're not going to send goods via Piedras Negras. The town has this precedent and it could come back at any time.
Since the start of the year, 26 migrants have drowned crossing the river between the 2 towns. Migration policy and tightened security on the southern border are at the heart of the US presidential election campaign.
Now, this is the Easter weekend, and like Christians around the world, migrants there at the US border have been marking Good Friday. In view of the barbed wire fences, a group led prayers and reenacted The Way of the Cross, featuring a person bearing a cross along the riverbank. A representative of the movement said they wanted to send a message telling the governor of Texas that migrants are not a problem. Meanwhile, there have been fresh concerns raised about the condition of the Pope following his no-show at the annual Good Friday Way of the Cross ceremony at the Colosseum in Rome. Now, thousands of the faithful stood holding candles and waited for the Pope, but moments before Pope Francis was due to arrive, his white chair was whisked away from the platform. The Vatican saying this was to protect his health. The 87-year-old pontiff had been present earlier on in the day to preside over the Good Friday service at St. Peter's Basilica. He's been hobbled by mobility and respiratory issues throughout the winter. We'll leave you with these pictures. Do stay tuned to us here. There's more world news coming up on France 24.
Tonight, the urgent mission to clear the wreckage of the collapsed bridge in Baltimore, record travel over spring break and the Easter holiday weekend, and tributes to actor Louis Gossett Jr. First, the around-the-clock effort to remove the twisted steel of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. Maryland's governor now says an armada of cranes, tugboats, and barges are on the way to help in the massive recovery effort. One of the largest cranes on the East Coast moving in, capable of lifting more than 2 million pounds at one time. 4 construction workers still missing. Salvage crews racing to reopen the shipping channel. Our team with the Coast Guard for an even closer look at the scene. Elizabeth Schulze in Baltimore. TSA reporting a record number of airline travelers over spring break and Easter weekend. The FAA investigating 2 planes clipping wings on the another flight diverted because of engine trouble. Trevor Ault standing by. A major storm taking aim at the U.S. over the holiday. Winter storm warnings, flood watches, and wind alerts from California to Colorado. Severe storms, including possible tornadoes, moving east. Bob Marciano timing it all out. Here in New York, police responding to an alarming number of reports of women being punched in the face during random attacks on the street. Some of the victims posting videos online. At least 2 suspects arrested. Police searching for several others. President Biden joined by former presidents Obama and Clinton, raising $26 million during a record-breaking fundraiser at Radio City Music Hall. The 3 presidents in a show of force taking swipes at Donald Trump. The event interrupted several times by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Late word tonight concerning Pope Francis, why the Vatican says he's skipping a Good Friday event. Tributes tonight to Louis Gossett Jr., the actor Breaking Barriers, known for his powerful roles, the first black man to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And Beyoncé goes country.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
Millions listening to her much-anticipated new album, Cowboy Carter, which includes a cover of a Dolly Parton classic.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us on a busy Friday night. I'm Mary Bruce, in for David. We begin tonight with the around-the-clock operation to clear the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the search for 4 missing workers, and the race to reopen those critical shipping lanes for one of America's busiest ports. Tonight, major reinforcements are now on the way, heavy equipment now on the scene, including the Chesapeake 1000, one of the largest cranes on the East Coast, capable of lifting more than 2 million pounds at a time. But this is just the beginning. Maryland Governor Wes Moore says 7 cranes, 10 tugboats, and 9 barges will be joining the salvage operation. Our team today out with the Coast Guard getting an up-close look at the destruction. Part of the bridge draped across the bow of the ship, massive amounts of debris, making it near impossible for dive teams to search for those 4 road crew workers who were on the bridge at the time and are now missing and presumed dead. Salvage crews are now trying to clear the shipping channel and resume traffic in and out of the port of Baltimore, as President Biden says he will visit the site next week. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze in Baltimore, leading us off. Tonight, the urgent mission to clear the mangled wreckage blocking the port of Baltimore, one of the busiest in the country. This colossal crane, one of the largest on the East Coast, now on scene, capable of lifting 2 million pounds at a time. But it's going to take more than that. This is just one of 4 heavy lift cranes that will begin removing what's left of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. Crews preparing to cut the twisted steel and carefully remove the massive chunks piece by piece before refloating the cargo ship Dolly, clearing the channel and reopening the port. You can see the cranes that came in overnight. They have a painstaking task ahead, lifting those pieces of steel from the river and clearing the debris. We were back on the water today with the Coast Guard, able to get closer than any time before. We're now 150 yards away from the container ship. The conditions here really give you a sense of how difficult this is going to be for first responders. The wind is picked up. All diving has been suspended as of right now. The bodies of 4 construction workers still trapped in the underwater wreckage.
We know there's at least one vehicle, larger in size, that is completely encapsulated by the structure. It's going to take some time to get to that.
Maryland's governor bracing the community for a long road to rebuild.
I can tell you it is not going to be days or weeks or months. This is going to take time.
This will certainly take some time, so let's get right to Elizabeth Schulze live on the scene there in Baltimore. And Elizabeth, the federal government is approving $60 million in emergency funding, and now President Biden is planning a visit.
Mary, President Biden says he'll visit Baltimore next week, and he's vowing that the federal government will cover the entire cost of rebuilding the bridge. Those $60 million in funds will help cover initial costs. The full project could be billions and take years to complete. Mary.
Elizabeth, following this story for us all week, thank you. We move on now to record holiday travel over spring break and the Easter weekend. The TSA reports yesterday saw the largest number of people at airport checkpoints so far this year. Flights packed amid growing concerns about safety issues involving the airplanes. 2 planes clipping wings, another flight diverted because of engine trouble. Here's ABC's Trevor Ault.
Tonight, the early Easter holiday rush stacked atop the crush of spring break travelers is leaving airports packed.
I want to get where I'm going, so I make sure to get here at least 3 hours early before my flight.
Officials at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson predicting today to be their busiest day of the month. And nationwide, the TSA says Thursday was their busiest day so far this year. A United flight from San Francisco to Paris had to divert due to engine trouble. The Boeing 777 landing in Denver, and at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, 2 Delta planes colliding on the taxiway.
Just startling a boom and most violent shake I've ever had on an airplane.
No one was hurt, but 287 passengers had to find another way to get to their destinations. And next week's numbers could even overshadow what we're seeing now, as spring breakers will soon share the skies with travelers heading to cities in the path of the coming total eclipse. The FAA says the busiest day next week will be Thursday, April 4th, with more than 50,000 flights set to take off. And they're warning of potential delays due to high volume of aircraft and drones attempting to witness the total solar eclipse. And Mary, of course, millions of people are driving and gas prices are rising even faster than they typically do this time of year. According to GasBuddy, the national average is now up to $3.54 a gallon. That is 7 cents higher than it was this time last year. Mary?
That crush of travel and spring break affecting the roads there as well. Trevor, thank you. Now to the major storm taking aim at the U.S. over the holiday. Winter storm warnings, flood watches, and wind alerts from California to Colorado. Severe storms, including possible tornadoes from Texas to Washington, D.C. early next week. So let's get right. JVC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano. Hey, Rob.
Hi, Mary. Holiday travel weather here in the East looks good, but the West, a whole other story with California on the front lines. You've got flood watches there and winter storm warnings. Big winds heading into Las Vegas and Arizona with this big system that's now slamming Northern California. It'll push a big pulse of rain into Southern California tonight, but that low kind of hangs back, so that'll bring another batch of rain in for Sunday. So that's going to lead to flooding, maybe some big-time flooding in mudslides, potentially Santa Barbara to San Diego through the weekend. On Monday, that energy erupts into severe storms into the plains. You could see tornadoes in places like Kansas City towards St. Louis, east of there up the Ohio River on Tuesday, and then into the northeast some come Wednesday and Thursday, potentially seeing some snow in some spots here late next week. Mary?
We know you'll be tracking it all, Rob. Thank you. Next tonight, the growing number of alarming attacks here in New York City. Multiple women coming forward, some posting videos online, claiming to have been punched in the face while simply walking on the street. Authorities say the attacks appear to be unrelated. At least 2 suspects are in custody. Police now searching for others. Here's ABC's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, the NYPD is investigating this incident and several others like it. A woman suddenly punched while walking on a Brooklyn sidewalk, seemingly for no reason.
I literally got punched by some man on the sidewalk.
In the last 2 weeks, several young women have posted on TikTok about getting randomly punched on the streets of New York City.
Out of nowhere, this man just came up and hit me in the face.
Tonight, with those videos as part of their investigation, police have made 2 arrests, including this man, Skiboki Stora, charged with attacking an influencer known as Hallie Kate, whose video has been viewed 49 million times.
Literally, I fell to the ground, and now this child is like squirming in a concussion, a black eye.
Design student Michaela Tornado shared a similar experience.
So I just got back from the emergency room after getting punched in the face.
Prosecutors said the man charged with assaulting her left the 27-year-old with a concussion and a visible mark on her eye. Police are investigating at least 7 random assaults where the victim later posted on TikTok. None is believed to be related to another. Tonight, police are looking for this man in connection with the assault of a 25-year-old woman in Times Square who was slapped in the forehead, and this man who allegedly punched a 24-year-old woman in the head.
While police say these attacks are not part of a pattern, Mary, that doesn't make them any less scary. Felony assaults in the city are up about 3%. Other statistics, though, show the post-pandemic violent crime surge is continuing to level off. Mary?
It's still a frightening development, Aaron. Thank you. Now to the race for the White House. President Biden joined by former Presidents Obama and Clinton, raising $26 million during a record-breaking fundraiser at Radio City Music Hall. President Biden today saying the event showed skeptics and supporters that the party is united. Donald Trump, the main target of the night. The presidents, though, interrupted several times by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Here's ABC's Mary Alice Parks.
Tonight, President Biden fresh off that record fundraiser, a show of force with Presidents Obama and Clinton by his side. His campaign claiming a $26 million haul in just one night. No press cameras allowed inside, the campaign instead releasing select clips. The president painting a stark choice for voters.
This guy denies there's a global warming. This guy wants to get rid of not only Roe v. Wade, but which he brags about having done. He wants to get rid of the ability of anyone anywhere in America to ever choose.
And turning the tables on Donald Trump.
I mean, all the things he's doing are so old. Speaking of old. And, you know, a little old and out of shape, but anyway.
President Obama trying to energize voters around Biden's record.
You've got record-breaking job growth. You've got an unemployment rate that is low as it has been.
The glitzy event at Radio City Music Hall.
Ladies and gentlemen,
which was designed to be a show of party unity, punctured by protesters, blasting Biden for his ongoing support of Israel's war in Gaza.
Shame on you! You are pushing genocide in Palestine!
Those party divisions on full display. Tonight, the Biden campaign is trying to bring in new voters with an appeal to Nikki Haley supporters, arguing in a new digital ad that Donald Trump does not want their votes.
How do you bring these Nikki Haley voters back into the town? I'm not sure we need too many.
Today, Trump doubling down on his message of law and order after visiting the family of slain NYPD officer Jonathan Diller.
It's got to stop. We have to have law and order. And when you have people repeat, this isn't a repeat offender. This is ridiculous.
Trump offering no details on how he'd fight crime. FBI data shows a recent drop in violent crime in most cities.
And Mary Alice joins us now. And there's also some news tonight on the election interference case against Donald Trump in Georgia. Trump's team appealing the judge's ruling that allows District Attorney Fani Willis to stay on that case. Yeah, Trump and some of his co-defendants have now formally filed their appeal, arguing that even though her lead prosecutor stepped aside, the case has the appearance of impropriety because of her past relationship with him. A 3-judge panel now has 45 days to decide whether to take up the appeal. The DA is asking for an August trial date. Mary, Trump continuing to try and challenge that case. Mary Alice, thank you. And there is late word tonight concerning Pope Francis. After leading a solemn Good Friday service at St. Peter's Basilica today, the Pope is skipping the Good Friday procession at the Colosseum in Rome in what is typically a very demanding week. The Vatican says he's trying to preserve his health for Easter Sunday. And tonight, American journalist Evan Gershkovich marking 1 year in jail in Russia. The Kremlin accusing him of collecting state secrets for the U.S. The Biden administration says the Wall Street Journal reporter is being wrongfully detained. The newspaper paying tribute to Gershkovich, leaving a blank space on its front page with the headline, "His story should be here." And we learned today that actor Louis Gossett Jr. has died, a trailblazing actor, the first black man to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for his role in An Officer and a Gentleman, a commanding presence in movies, on stage, and television, including the groundbreaking series Roots. Here's ABC's Steve Osunsani.
The winner is Louis Gossett Jr.
In an interview published just earlier this year, the one and only Louis Gossett Jr. explained that this moment, when he won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in 1983, gave him the ability to choose good parts in movies that wouldn't have necessarily gone to a black man.
Every time time I say understand, I want the whole group to say, yes, sir, understand. Yes, sir, understand. Yes, sir.
After his role as a tough drill sergeant, an officer and a gentleman that delivered that gold statue, came roles that awarded him in other ways, like his long run in the big-budget Iron Eagle action films.
Just press that one way. I'll do the rest.
And what the actor says was his favorite role ever, as the alien soldier in Enemy Mine, where he and a human soldier, played by actor Dennis Quaid, had to overcome their differences to survive.
You saved my life. Why? I need to look at another face, even as ugly as yours.
But for many Americans who remember a time when there were very few black faces on American television, he'll always be remembered for his role in the miniseries Roots that aired on this very network that introduced millions to the powerful and painful history of how black people came to America.
You go running off in the hills, you know what's gonna happen to me? I get to sleep on a mud floor. I just eat what the pigs won't eat.
I had to overcome some disappointments in order to know that God put me on the planet and gave me a gift to do it anyway.
He was only the second black man ever to win an Oscar for acting. In the real world, he would spend much of his life encouraging black men to get early screenings for prostate cancer, which he beat. He was 87 years old. Mary?
A remarkable legacy on and off screen. Steve, thank you. And when we come back, a shocking arrest in Florida. 2 10-year-old boys arrested at an elementary school for allegedly selling a gun. And America Strong tonight, the cheerleader overcoming obstacles and lifting everyone's spirits. Next tonight, a stunning case out of Florida. 2 10-year-old students arrested after a handgun was sold at Country Oaks Elementary School. Police say one of the boys, the son of a deputy, agreed to sell his deceased father's weapon for $300. It happened in February, but was discovered this week after police say they found ammunition in the backpack of the other student. And now to an alert from the CDC, a rare type of bacterial illness that can cause meningitis is increasing. 422 cases were reported last year, the most since 2014. One strain proving to be more deadly than usual, with 1 in 6 people dying. Most of the victims are middle-aged adults. The federal agency encouraging those eligible to stay up to date on their vaccines. And when we come back, Beyonce goes country. Her new album already breaking records. To the Index tonight, and news from the IRS about $1 billion in unclaimed tax refunds for 2020. Taxpayers have until May 17th to get their money. The IRS estimates that the median refund for that year is $932. All this just as millions are preparing to meet the deadline to file their taxes for 2023. And tonight, the wait is over. Beyonce's Cowboy Carter is finally out. The country-inspired, genre-bending album is already delighting critics and fans. The Grammy winner even covers Dolly Parton's classic, Jolene.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
And Parton herself introduces that track. Willie Nelson and Linda Martell, a black country music pioneer, introduce songs as well. The album already breaking first-day streaming records on Amazon Music. No surprise there. And when we come back, America Strong, the Texas cheerleader inspiring others and lifting spirits everywhere. Finally, tonight, the cheerleader making her dream come true and inspiring others along the way. Juliana Linton has wanted to be a competitive cheerleader for as long as she can remember. Born with one arm, Juliana never let that stop her from pursuing her dream. Here she is at 7 at a cheerleading competition. Today, Juliana is a senior at Cy Ranch High School in Cypress, Texas. In addition to cheering on the ground, she does this, soaring high above her squad members as a flyer.
I think it's super fun. I don't ever get scared when I'm up there. I love getting to fly and stunt and prove to everyone that you should never let anyone doubt your abilities and that you're able to do anything that you put your mind to.
And she is paying her love for and prowess in gymnastics forward. 3 nights a week, she coaches preschoolers at the same gym where she trained when she was a young gymnast.
A lot of times, I'll show them how to do something and they'll do a handstand or cartwheel with one hand because they want to be just like me. So it's really cool to be an inspiration to other people.
Juliana with this message for us all.
I hope that I can inspire more people across the world and show them to never give up on your dreams.
Juliana flying high. Thank you for watching. I'm Mary Bruce. For David and all of us here, good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Moore, America's most watched newscast.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.